My parents chose alcohol over my acne cream and it cost me everything. Now mom wants me to pay for her surgery. Growing up poor was something I got used to quickly because I had no other choice. We lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment where the heat barely worked in winter, and the air conditioning was a fan pointed at your face. I went to a public school where I wore the same 5 outfits on rotation, and prayed nobody noticed. My parents never took me out to eat because according to my mother, feeding 3 people was too expensive when they could just feed themselves and leave me leftovers. Birthdays were the only exception. And even then my celebration was choosing between McDonald's or Taco Bell. I never got Christmas presents or Easter baskets like my classmates. The thing that made it worse was knowing we weren't as broke as my parents claimed. My dad always had money for alcohol. Every week he came home with bottles like clockwork. But somehow there was never enough for school supplies or new shoes when mine had holes. I resented them but kept it inside because what was the point? By sophomore year I accepted my place at the bottom. I ate lunch in bathroom stalls because sitting alone in the cafeteria felt like wearing a sign that said, "Nobody wants me." I sat in the back of every class and spoke only when forced to. At home, I spent all my time teaching myself to code because it was free and it was an escape. Junior year, everything changed when a new student arrived. His name was Julian, and he was an exchange student from France. He was tall with wavy brown hair and a smile that made every girl lose their minds. The school assigned me to help him since I was the only student who paid attention in French class. I figured he would ditch me for the popular crowd within a week, but he didn't. He thought the girls who threw themselves at him were ridiculous, and would whisper jokes about them to me in French. We became close, and I started feeling something I had never felt before. Then he asked me on a date. He told me to dress nice because we were going somewhere special. I put on my best outfit, and he showed up in a full suit. He took me to McDonald's. We sat there eating nuggets in formal wear, laughing until my stomach hurt. It was the happiest night of my life. But happiness doesn't last when you're me. The next week, the popular girls cornered me. They asked how someone like me ended up with him. They asked if he had seen my skin up close. They pointed at my acne and laughed, saying he would leave the second he realized what he was dating. I went home and did something I never did. I asked my parents for something. I begged my mom for acne cream. It was maybe $20, and I said I would never ask for anything again. She looked at me and said no. She said my dad needed that money. I cried myself to sleep that night and many nights after. The girl's words echoed constantly. I stopped looking Julian in the eyes. I started canceling plans and avoiding him. He kept asking what was wrong, and I couldn't tell him. Eventually, he stopped asking. By semester end, he was dating someone else. I went back to coding with a fire inside me. I taught myself everything and started applying to internships before graduation. I landed one at a major tech company and worked harder than anyone. 10 years later, I was making more than my parents would see in 5 lifetimes. They found out through relatives and suddenly wanted a relationship. First, it was help with rent, then a new car, then a bigger house. I gave them everything thinking maybe now they would love me. Last month, my mother called asking for something that made my blood cold. She wanted me to pay for a facelift and Botox. She said she deserved to feel beautiful in her older years. I asked if she remembered when I begged for $20 acne cream, and she chose alcohol instead. She got quiet. I told her that decision cost me the only boy who ever made me feel worth something. I said I would not pay for her face when she refused to help mine. She called me ungrateful. My dad screamed that I owed them for raising me. I hung up. They've told the whole family I'm a monster who abandoned her parents. But what they don't know is I recently tracked down Julian. He's back in the States and single, and he remembers me. I stare at his profile picture for the 3rd time today. My finger hovers over the message button. The cursor blinks at me like it's daring me to actually do something. Julian's back in the States. 2 hours away. Working as a translator according to his LinkedIn. Single according to the absence of couple photos on Instagram. My heart does that stupid racing thing it used to do when I was 16. But now there's also this cold fear sitting in my stomach. What if he doesn't remember me the way I remember him? What if he does remember me and wants nothing to do with the girl who ghosted him without explanation? I open the message box and type something. Delete it. Type again. Delete again. The words feel too casual, then too desperate, then too formal like I'm applying for a job. I must draft 5 different versions before I finally settle on something simple. Hey, I saw you're back in the country. Would love to catch up sometime if you're interested. My hands shake as I hover over send. This is stupid. He probably won't even respond. Or he'll be polite but distant. Or worse, he'll remember exactly how I treated him and tell me to leave him alone. I close my eyes and hit send before I can delete it again. I put my phone face down on my desk and try to focus on work. 20 minutes pass. Each minute feels like an hour. Then my phone buzzes. I grab it so fast I almost drop it. His reply is right there on my screen. Oh wow, hey, I'd love to catch up. Are you still in the area? My chest gets tight. He remembers me. He wants to see me. I read his message 3 more times to make sure I'm not imagining the enthusiasm. We exchange messages throughout the day. It feels easy, natural, like no time has passed even though it's been 10 years. He asks what I'm doing for work, and I tell him about my tech career. He tells me about moving back from France and settling into his translator job. Then he brings up the McDonald's date. Still one of my favorite memories from that year. We were so overdressed for nuggets. I laugh out loud at my desk. Melody glances over at me with raised eyebrows, but I ignore her. He suggests dinner next weekend. My brain immediately starts spiraling. What if I'm different from he remembers? What if he's disappointed? What if I say something stupid? What if the popular girls were right and he realizes I'm not worth his time? But I type yes before I can talk myself out of it. We pick a restaurant. Saturday at 7. It's happening. I'm going to see Julian again. The next morning, my phone rings. Mom. I consider not answering, but that'll just make her call more. I pick up. Her voice is different from last time. Sweet. Soft. Like honey. Sweetie, I've been thinking about what you said. Here we go. I want you to understand why this surgery is so important to me. As women age, society treats us differently. I just want to feel beautiful again. Is that so wrong? She's trying a new angle. The reasonable approach. Like if I just understood her perspective, I'd hand over the money. Mom, I'm not discussing this anymore. She starts crying. Loud sobs through the phone. I end the call. Work becomes my escape. I throw myself into a new project. Code doesn't judge me. Code doesn't manipulate me. Code does exactly what I tell it to do. But Melody notices I'm distracted. She pulls me aside during lunch. You okay? You seem off. I give her the basic outline. Parents want money for cosmetic surgery. I said no. Family drama. She nods slowly. I went no contact with my parents 5 years ago. Best decision I ever made. She doesn't push for details. Just tells me I'm not overreacting. That validation helps more than she knows. That evening, my father leaves a voicemail. I listen to it once. His voice is angry, loud. He calls me selfish, ungrateful. Then he lists everything they did for me. We kept a roof over your head. We fed you. We clothed you. We sacrificed so much. I feel rage building in my chest. He's listing basic legal requirements for having a child like he deserves a medal. Feeding me leftovers isn't sacrifice. Keeping the heat barely working isn't sacrifice. Choosing alcohol over my needs isn't sacrifice. I save the voicemail in a new folder on my phone. Documentation, just in case. The week drags by. Each day feels longer than the last. I catch myself thinking about Saturday constantly. What should I wear? How should I do my hair? Should I wear makeup? I haven't obsessed over my appearance like this since high school. I go shopping. Buy 3 different outfits. Return 2 of them. The one I keep looks nice, but not like I tried too hard. Casual, but put together. My skin is clear now. Years of proper skincare I could finally afford fixed most of the acne. But the scars are still there. Faint, but visible. Old insecurities whisper that he'll notice. That he'll see them and remember why he upgraded to someone prettier. Saturday finally arrives. I change clothes twice before leaving my apartment. The restaurant is a mid-range Italian place. Nice enough to show effort, but not so fancy it feels like too much pressure. I park and check my reflection in the car mirror one more time. My hands are shaking. I walk inside and scan the room. He's already there, standing near the hostess stand. When he sees me, his face lights up. He's taller than I remember, broader, but his smile is exactly the same. Warm, genuine, directed entirely at me. My heart does that stupid racing thing again. We sit down and order drinks. The conversation flows easily at first, surface level catching up. He tells me about France, about studying linguistics, about traveling through Europe, about deciding to come back to the US for better job opportunities. When he asks about my life, I focus on work, on my success, on the career I built from nothing. I leave out the parts about my parents, about the money, about the current mess. That's too heavy for a first date, or reunion, or whatever this is. Halfway through dinner, his expression changes, gets serious, a little sad. I never understood why you pulled away from me junior year. My stomach drops. I thought maybe I did something wrong, or moved too fast, or misread what we had. The guilt hits me hard. He spent years thinking he was the problem, that he messed up somehow, when really it was me. My insecurity, my inability to believe someone like him could actually want someone like me. You didn't do anything wrong, I say quietly. Then I tell him the truth, about the popular girls, about their comments, about begging my parents for acne cream, about them choosing alcohol instead, about how their words got inside my head and convinced me he would leave eventually, so I should leave first. His face goes through several emotions, surprise, understanding, then anger, but not at me, at them, at my parents, at the situation. He reaches across the table and takes my hand. His hand is warm, solid, real. I never cared about your skin. I thought you were beautiful then. I think you're beautiful now. Something breaks loose in my chest. Something that's been tight for 10 years. We stay at the restaurant talking until the staff starts stacking chairs around us. The hostess gives us a pointed look. We finally leave. He walks me to my car in the parking lot. The air is cold, but I barely notice. Can I see you again next weekend? He asks. Yes, I say immediately. No overthinking, no talking myself out of it. Just yes. He hugs me goodbye. His arms around me feel safe, familiar, like coming home after being lost for a decade. I drive home with my mind racing and my chest feeling lighter than it has in months. Then my phone starts buzzing. Text after text. Family members I barely know. My father's sister. 2 cousins I haven't spoken to in years. My mother's brother. All saying the same thing. Disappointed in me. Can't believe I'd abandoned my parents. They need me and I'm being selfish. I realize my parents have launched a full campaign, turning the family against me, making me the villain in their story. I screenshot everything, add it to my documentation folder. My good mood from dinner evaporates. Sunday morning, I wake up to my phone going off like crazy. Text after text, notifications piling up. I grab my phone and start reading. My mother posted on Facebook, not about me directly, but it's obvious. She wrote about how some daughters forget where they came from, how they get successful and abandon their aging parents who sacrificed everything, how she's getting older and needs help, but her child turned her back. The comments are full of relatives I barely talk to saying how sorry they are for her, how disappointed they are in ungrateful children these days. My aunt leaves a heart emoji. Two cousins I haven't seen in years write long, supportive messages to my mother. I screenshot every single post and comment. Add them all to the folder on my computer labeled documentation. My hands shake while I do it. The public manipulation makes my stomach turn. She's painting herself as the victim, making me the villain. And people believe her because they don't know the truth. They don't know about the alcohol, the neglect, the $20 acne cream she refused to buy. I spend the rest of Sunday researching therapists. I type in family trauma and boundary setting. Read through profiles of different counselors. Most of them sound too clinical, too distant. Then I find Laura Petit. Her bio talks about childhood emotional neglect, about learning to recognize patterns of manipulation, about building healthy boundaries with toxic family members. Everything she describes sounds like my life. I book a consultation for Wednesday evening, the earliest she has available. Clicking that confirm button feels huge, like I'm admitting something I've been avoiding my whole life. That my childhood wasn't just about being poor. It was about being unwanted. Taking this step scares me, but also feels right. Like I'm finally doing something for myself instead of just surviving. Monday morning, I get called into an unexpected meeting. HR and my manager want to see me. My stomach drops immediately. I think my mother found my workplace somehow. Called them with some story about me being unstable or cruel. I walk into the conference room preparing for the worst, but they smile when I sit down. Tell me Melody expressed concern about my stress levels lately. They want to offer me 2 weeks of paid personal leave if I need it. No questions asked. Just support. The relief hits me hard. I thank them but say I'll let them know if things get worse. Right now, work is the one stable thing I have. The one place where I'm valued for what I do instead of what I should give. Walking back to my desk, I feel grateful. Melody catches my eye and gives me a small nod. She didn't have to do that, but she did. Tuesday evening, my phone buzzes with a text from Julian. He asks if I want to meet for coffee this week instead of waiting until the weekend. My heart does that stupid racing thing again. I suggest Thursday after my therapy appointment. He responds within seconds saying that works perfectly. No questions about why I have therapy. No judgment. Just easy acceptance. That simple response makes me like him even more. Most people would ask, would want details, would make it weird, but he just agrees and says he's looking forward to it. I put my phone down and smile for the first time all day. Wednesday evening arrives and I drive to Laura Petit's office. It's in a professional building downtown. Clean, quiet, calming in a way that feels intentional. She greets me in the waiting room. Mid-40s maybe. Kind eyes, comfortable clothes. We sit in her office and she starts asking questions about my childhood. Simple questions at first. Where did you live? What were your parents like? How did you spend your time? But then the questions get harder. She asks about specific memories, about how I felt, about what I needed but didn't get. I find myself crying while I describe the birthday meals at fast food restaurants. The same 5 outfits I wore to the school. Things I thought I was over. Things I told myself weren't that bad. She listens without interrupting. Then she says something that stops me cold. She tells me I'm minimizing what happened, that I keep calling it growing up poor when it was actually my parents choosing alcohol over their child's needs. The difference hits me hard. Poor means you don't have money. What I experienced was having money that went to bottles instead of me. Laura asks me to describe the acne cream incident in detail. I start talking and suddenly I'm 16 again, begging my mother for $20. Her looking at me like I'm asking for something ridiculous. Her saying no without hesitation. Her saying my dad needed that money. I break down completely, sobbing in a way I haven't in years. Laura hands me tissues and waits. When I can talk again, she helps me see something I never understood before. The cream itself wasn't the real issue. It was the pattern. My needs being dismissed over and over as unimportant compared to what my parents wanted. By the end of the session, I'm exhausted, wrung out. But something important has shifted. I can feel it even if I can't name it yet. Thursday afternoon, I meet Julian at a coffee shop near my apartment. Walking in, I see him already at a table by the window. He stands when he sees me, hugs me hello. We order drinks and sit down. The therapy session is still fresh in my mind. Raw. He asks how my week was and I find myself opening up more than I planned. I tell him I started therapy, that I'm dealing with family stuff. He doesn't push for details, just listens. Then he shares something I didn't expect. He tells me he saw a therapist for 2 years after a difficult breakup, that it helped him understand himself better, figure out what he wanted. His openness about his own struggles makes me feel less broken, less alone. Like needing help doesn't make me weak or damaged. We talk for 2 hours. The conversation flows easy, natural. When we leave, he walks me to my car and kisses my cheek. Tells me he's glad I'm taking care of myself, that I deserve support. Driving home, I feel lighter than I have in weeks. Friday morning, I'm at my desk working through code reviews when my phone buzzes. The doorman downstairs. He tells me my parents are in the lobby asking to come up. My stomach drops and I feel sweat break out on my palms. I tell him no. I say to inform them I'm not available. He says he understands, and the line goes quiet. I walk to my window and look down at the building entrance. From 12 floors up, I can see 2 figures near the front desk. My mother's gestures are big and dramatic. My father stands with his arms crossed. They're talking to the doorman, and I watch him shake his head. My mother puts her hands to her face. Even from this distance, I can tell she's crying. My father leans forward and points at the doorman. The doorman steps back and picks up the desk phone. Security, I assume. My hands shake as I watch this play out. The power I have right now feels strange. I said no, and someone actually listened. My phone rings. My father. I let it go to voicemail and wait. 30 seconds later, the notification appears. I press play and his voice fills my ear. He's yelling about how I'm going to talk to them whether I like it or not. He says they'll wait in the lobby all day if that's what it takes. He says I owe them this much after everything they've done for me. His voice is slurred slightly. Drunk already, and it's not even noon. I hang up and dial building security. A woman answers and I explain the situation calmly. I tell her these people showed up without permission and are refusing to leave. I say I don't want them here and I need them removed. She asks if I feel unsafe and I say yes without hesitation. She tells me a guard is already down there and they'll be escorted out. I thank her and end the call. Back at the window, I watch a security guard in a dark uniform approach my parents. My father gestures wildly. My mother is still crying. The guard points toward the door. My father shakes his head. The guard says something else and my father's body language changes. He looks up at the building like he's trying to figure out which window is mine. The guard touches his radio. My father must realize he's not winning this because he turns and walks toward the exit. My mother follows him but keeps looking back at the doorman. They disappear from view and I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The boundary held. I enforced it and it worked. But the feeling isn't relief. It's weird and uncomfortable, like wearing shoes that don't fit right. This is what setting limits feels like and I'm not used to it. That evening I'm making dinner when my email notification pings. The sender name makes my chest tighten. My mother. The subject line says we need to talk. I open it even though every instinct tells me not to. The email is long. Really long. She starts with the day she found out she was pregnant with me. She describes morning sickness and how hard the pregnancy was on her body. Then she lists every expense from my childhood. Diapers, formula, doctor visits, clothes, food, school supplies. She's itemized 18 years of raising a child like she's sending me an invoice. At the bottom, she's added it all up. $200,000 she claims. She says this is what I cost them and paying for her surgery is the least I can do. She says other daughters would be grateful for parents who sacrificed so much. She ends with a line about how she hopes I can live with myself, knowing I abandoned the people who gave me everything. I read it twice. The audacity would be funny if it didn't hurt so much. She's made our entire relationship into a transaction. Every meal she fed me. Every roof over my head. She kept a running tab in her mind and now she's cashing it in. I forward the email to myself in 3 different folders. Documentation, evidence, proof that this isn't normal parent behavior. Then I close my laptop and try to eat dinner, but my appetite is gone. My second session with Laura happens 3 days later. I bring printed copies of the email and tell her about my parents showing up at my building. She reads the email carefully while I sit in the chair across from her picking at my thumbnail. When she finishes, she sets the papers down and looks at me. She asks how I felt reading it. I tell her angry and sad and confused all at once. She nods and introduces a term I've never applied to my situation before. Financial abuse. She explains that my parents trained me from childhood to feel guilty for existing, for costing them money, for needing things. They set up a dynamic where I would always feel like I owed them, where I could never pay them back enough. This wasn't about being poor. This was about control. Making sure I knew my place. Making sure I felt indebted forever. The reframing hits me hard. I always thought they were just bad with money, just selfish. But this was intentional. A pattern they created and maintained for decades. Everything they're doing now isn't new behavior. It's the same manipulation I grew up with, just escalated because I finally said no. Lara asks what I want to do about the escalation. I tell her I don't know. She suggests I might benefit from a support group for adult children of emotionally abusive parents. She writes down information for one that meets Tuesday evenings at a community center downtown. The idea of talking about this with strangers makes my skin crawl, but I take the paper anyway. She also says that if my parents keep showing up places, I might need formal boundaries. Legal ones. A restraining order, maybe. The words sound extreme, but after this week, they also sound necessary. Saturday morning, Julian texts asking if I want to spend the day exploring the city. I say yes immediately. I need something normal. Something good. We meet at a museum downtown, and he's waiting outside when I arrive. He hugs me, and I hold on longer than I probably should. We spend 2 hours walking through exhibits. Modern art that I don't always understand, but he explains in ways that make sense. We hold hands as we move from room to room, and it feels easy. Natural. Like we're picking up exactly where we left off with 10 years of growth between us. After the museum, we walk through a park nearby. The weather is perfect. Cool but sunny. Leaves are starting to change colors. We grab lunch at a small cafe with outdoor seating and talk about everything except my parents. He tells me about his work as a translator. About funny misunderstandings that happen when people rely too much on apps instead of actual language knowledge. I tell him about my current project at work, and he listens like it's the most interesting thing he's heard all week. We walk more after lunch, through neighborhoods I've lived near for years but never really explored. He points out architectural details I never noticed. Small gardens tucked between buildings. A bookstore I didn't know existed. Being with him feels like seeing my own city for the first time. We end up back at the park on a bench watching people pass by. He's still holding my hand, and I realize I haven't thought about my parents in hours. That's when he starts talking about his past decade in more detail. He had a serious relationship in France. 3 years with someone who wanted to stay there permanently. He wanted to come back to the States. They couldn't make it work. He's been single for 8 months. He says he wasn't looking to date anyone. Wasn't ready. But running into me again feels different. Like the universe giving him another chance at something he thought he'd lost. His honesty makes my throat tight. I tell him I never really got over him. That I dated other people, but it never felt the same. He squeezes my hand and we sit there in comfortable silence for a while. That evening, we have dinner at a nicer restaurant. Italian place with white tablecloths and candles. The conversation stays light through appetizers, but over main courses it shifts. He asks me the full story of why I pulled away in high school. Not just the recent stuff with my parents, but what actually happened back then. I take a breath and tell him everything. The popular girls cornering me. Their comments about my skin. How their words planted seeds that grew into full-blown insecurity. How I begged my parents for $20 acne cream and my mother said no. How I convinced myself he would eventually see what those girls saw. That I wasn't good enough. That he'd leave once he really looked at me. I tell him I started canceling plans and avoiding eye contact because I couldn't stand the thought of him realizing his mistake. He listens without interrupting. His expression gets sadder as I talk, but he doesn't cut me off or try to fix it. When I finish, he's quiet for a moment. Then he tells me he wishes I'd trusted him enough to tell him back then. But he understands why I couldn't. He says he spent years wondering what he did wrong. Whether he pushed too hard or moved too fast. Whether he misread our whole connection. Hearing that he blamed himself makes guilt crash through me. But before I can apologize, he reaches across the table and takes my hand. He says he's not telling me this to make me feel bad. He's telling me so I know how much I mattered to him. That it wasn't just some high school thing he forgot about. He dated other people over the years, but never felt the same ease and joy he felt with me during those few months. The way he says it makes something inside me crack open. All these years I thought I was protecting myself by pushing him away. I thought I was saving myself from inevitable heartbreak. But I was the one who caused it. I broke both our hearts because I couldn't believe someone might actually want me. We finish dinner and walk to the parking lot slowly. Neither of us wants the night to end. Before I get in my car, he pulls me close and kisses my forehead. He tells me he's glad we found each other again. That this time he's not letting me disappear without a fight. I drive home with tears on my face, but they're not sad ones. For the first time in a long time, I feel like maybe I deserve something good. Sunday morning, I wake up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. And for a second, I think it's my parents again. But it's Julian asking if I want to meet for breakfast. I stare at the message and realize he's making excuses to see me just like I've been making excuses to see him. I text back yes and suggest a diner near my apartment. He sends back a smiley face and says he'll be there in an hour. I shower and change 3 times before settling on jeans and a sweater that looks casual but took effort. The diner is one of those old school places with red vinyl booths and laminated menus, and Julian is already waiting when I arrive. He stands when he sees me, and his smile makes my stomach flip. We slide into a booth and order coffee, and I realize I'm nervous in a way I haven't been since high school. The conversation starts easy with small talk about our weeks, but then shifts into something deeper. He tells me about his apartment search and asks my opinion on neighborhoods. I tell him about a project at work, and he asks detailed questions that show he's actually listening. 3 hours pass before I notice, and our coffee cups have been refilled 4 times. The waitress keeps giving us looks like we should order food or leave, but neither of us wants to move. That's when Julian leans forward and asks if we're dating or just hanging out. The directness catches me off guard, and I feel heat creep up my neck. I tell him I'd like to be dating if he's interested in taking that risk with me again. His smile spreads slowly across his face, and he reaches across the table to take my hand. He says yes before I can second-guess myself, and the relief that floods through me is overwhelming. We finally order actual breakfast, even though it's past noon, and sit there eating pancakes while holding hands across the table like teenagers. When we finally leave the diner, the sun is bright and everything feels lighter somehow. I drive home floating on happiness, but it crashes the second I see my phone. Missed calls from family members I barely know, and a voicemail from my Aunt Alina. I almost delete it without listening because I'm tired of defending myself to people who never cared before. But something makes me press play. Her voice is quiet and careful as she says she thinks my parents are wrong, and she's sorry for what they put me through as a child. I stop walking in the middle of my living room and replay it to make sure I heard right. She says she noticed things back then, but didn't feel it was her place to interfere, and she regrets not speaking up. The validation hits me so hard I have to sit down. Someone from my family actually sees the truth and isn't making excuses for them. But mixed with the relief is anger that it took this long. That she watched me go without and said nothing. That she's apologizing now when it would have mattered so much more then. I call her back because I need to hear more. She answers on the first ring like she was waiting. We talk for an hour and she tells me things I didn't know she noticed. How I wore the same clothes constantly. How there was never food in the house when she visited. How my parents always had money for themselves but nothing for me. She says she thought about calling someone, but my parents always had explanations ready, and she didn't want to cause family drama. I tell her I understand, but part of me doesn't. Part of me wants to scream that her silence hurt me too. Alina shifts the conversation and tells me my mother has been calling all the relatives with increasingly dramatic stories about my cruelty. She says my mother is claiming I've cut them off completely, and refuse to let them see me. That I've abandoned them in their old age and won't help with basic necessities. I feel my jaw clench as I listen. I tell Alina the truth about them showing up at my apartment and being escorted out by security. About the email demanding $200,000. About the cease and desist letter. She sighs and says that sounds more accurate than my mother's version. She promises not to share what I tell her with other family members, and I feel grateful to have at least one ally. Before we hang up, she tells me she's proud of me for setting boundaries, and she hopes I'll stay in touch with her even if I don't with my parents. I promise I will and mean it. After the call, I sit on my couch feeling like maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. Monday morning, I walk into work feeling different. Lighter somehow despite everything happening with my family. I dive into my projects with focus I haven't had in weeks, and actually enjoy what I'm doing instead of using it as distraction. Melody stops by my desk mid-morning with coffee and comments that I seem lighter. I tell her about starting therapy and reconnecting with an old friend, keeping the details vague but letting her know things are moving in a positive direction. She perches on the edge of my desk and tells me she's proud of me for taking care of myself and not letting family guilt control my choices. Her support means more than she knows because she doesn't owe me anything but gives it anyway. We talk for a few minutes about her weekend and normal work stuff, and it feels good to focus on something other than drama. When she leaves, I turn back to my computer and actually smile at the code on my screen. Progress feels possible for the first time in a while. Tuesday evening, I force myself to attend the support group Lara recommended, even though every part of me wants to cancel. I drive to the community center and sit in my car for 10 minutes working up courage to go inside. The meeting room is small with chairs arranged in a circle and 8 other people already sitting. The facilitator welcomes me and explains the format without making a big deal of me being new. People share stories and I listen with growing recognition. A man talks about his mother showing up at his job demanding money. A woman describes her father's drunk phone calls blaming her for his problems. Someone else shares about feeling guilty for having boundaries with parents who neglected them as kids. Every story sounds disturbingly similar to mine, and I realize I'm not crazy. This is a pattern. These are tactics. Other people have survived this and come out the other side. When it's my turn to share, I keep it brief and just say I'm dealing with family stuff and learning about boundaries. Nobody pushes for details or offers unwanted advice. They just nod with understanding that feels like its own kind of validation. Hearing others describe the same guilt and manipulation helps me feel less alone, and less like I'm overreacting. Maybe my parents really are the problem and not me. During the support group, a woman named Paulina shares about her mother demanding money for cosmetic procedures, and I freeze. The story is so similar to mine, it's eerie. She talks about feeling guilty for saying no and relatives calling her selfish. When the meeting ends, I approach her carefully and ask if she went to Lincoln Elementary. Her eyes widen, and she looks at me closer before her face lights up with recognition. She remembers me, and we exchange numbers right there in the parking lot. We agree to get coffee later this week, and I drive home feeling like the universe just handed me something important. Someone who knew my family during my childhood, and can validate my memories. Someone who understands because she lived something similar. I text Julian when I get home and tell him about the group and running into Paulina. He texts back asking how I'm feeling, and I realize I'm feeling hopeful. Like maybe I can actually get through this. Wednesday, I meet Julian for dinner at a Thai place downtown and tell him more about the support group. He listens with the same patient attention he always gives me and asks thoughtful questions about what I'm learning and how I'm feeling. He never once suggests I should just forgive my parents or try to work things out. He never implies I'm being too harsh or should give them another chance. His consistent support of my boundaries makes me trust him more deeply. I realize I've been waiting for him to tell me I'm wrong, but he never does. We order pad thai and spring rolls, and I find myself relaxing into the conversation, telling him things I've never told anyone. How guilty I feel for having money when they don't. How I still sometimes think maybe I am ungrateful. How scared I am that everyone will side with them and I'll end up alone. He reaches across the table and takes my hand and tells me I won't be alone. That he's here and not going anywhere. The certainty in his voice makes something inside me settle. Julian starts talking about his own family dynamics, and I'm surprised by his openness. He describes parents who are loving but struggled with his decision to leave France permanently. They wanted him close, and he wanted his own life in a different country. He talks about the guilt he felt choosing his own path over their wishes, and how it took therapy to understand he could love them while still making different choices. He says they eventually accepted his decision, but it took years and lots of difficult conversations. His perspective helps me see that healthy families can disagree without resorting to manipulation and punishment. That love doesn't mean giving up yourself to make others happy. I ask if he still feels guilty sometimes, and he admits he does, but he's learned to sit with that feeling instead of letting it control his choices. We talk until the restaurant starts closing and the staff begins stacking chairs. Walking to our cars, he pulls me close and kisses my forehead. Tells me we'll figure this out together. I believe him. Thursday morning, I wake up to a voicemail from my mother and my stomach drops before I even listen. Her voice is shaky and dramatic as she says she's been diagnosed with depression, and it's my fault for abandoning her. She says if anything happens to her, it will be on my conscience. The emotional manipulation is so blatant I almost laugh. Almost. But underneath the absurdity is fear that maybe she's right. Maybe I am destroying her. I save the voicemail and try to go about my morning, but it sits heavy in my chest. That evening, I bring it to my therapy session with Lara and play it for her. She listens with a neutral expression, and then asks what I notice about the message. I say it feels manipulative, but I still feel guilty. She nods and helps me identify it as a classic guilt-tripping tactic. The diagnosis that may or may not be real. The blame placed entirely on me. The veiled threat about something happening to her. Lara points out that my mother is trying to make me responsible for her emotions and mental health when that's not my job. She asks if my mother mentioned seeing a therapist or taking medication or any actual steps to address this depression. I realize she didn't. Just the diagnosis and the blame. Lara helps me see the pattern, and by the end of the session, I feel steadier. Lara asks if I've considered what outcome I actually want with my parents, and the question stops me cold. I realize I've been so focused on defending my boundaries that I haven't thought about long-term goals. What do I actually want? Do I want them in my life at all? She waits patiently while I think. I tell her honestly that I don't think I want a relationship with them anymore. That the cost to my mental health is too high. That every interaction leaves me feeling worse about myself. That I've spent my whole life hoping they would change and love me the way I needed, and they never have. Saying it out loud feels both liberating and terrifying. Like closing a door I've been holding open my whole life hoping someone would walk through. Lara asks how it feels to say that, and I tell her it feels like grief, like I'm mourning parents I never really had. She nods and says, that's normal. That I can grieve what I needed and didn't get while still protecting myself going forward. We sit with that for a while, and when I leave her office, I feel raw but also clear. I know what I want now. I want peace. And that means letting them go. Friday evening arrives, and I clean my apartment 3 times before Julian is supposed to show up. I keep checking my phone and rearranging throw pillows and wondering why I'm so nervous about someone I've known since high school seeing where I live. The doorbell rings at exactly 7, and I open it to find him holding a bottle of wine in one hand and flowers in the other. He smiles and tells me my place is beautiful, and I realize he's nervous too. We walk into my kitchen, and I put the flowers in water while he opens the wine. He asks what we're making, and I tell him pasta because it's easy and hard to mess up. We work side by side chopping vegetables and boiling water, and it feels natural in a way I wasn't expecting. He tells me about his apartment across town and how he's still unpacking boxes from his move. I tell him about buying this place 2 years ago, and how it was the first time I ever felt like I had a real home. The pasta finishes, and we sit at my small dining table eating and drinking wine and talking about nothing important. He compliments my cooking even though it's just spaghetti, and I laugh and say he's being too nice. After dinner, we move to the couch with our wine glasses and the conversation shifts. He asks what I want from this, and I freeze because I wasn't expecting directness. He says he's not interested in casual dating anymore, and he wants a real partnership with someone who's willing to build something lasting. I tell him I'm scared of getting hurt again, but I want the same thing. He reaches over and takes my hand and says we should communicate openly about any concerns as they come up. I agree and feel like we just made some kind of promise to each other. Then he leans in and kisses me, and it's both exactly like I remember, and completely different. We spend the rest of the evening on my couch talking and kissing like teenagers, but with the awareness of adults who know how rare this kind of connection is. When he leaves around midnight, I walk him to the door and he kisses me one more time and tells me he'll call tomorrow. I close the door and lean against it, feeling happier than I have in years. Saturday morning, I wake up to my phone buzzing nonstop on my nightstand. I reach for it with my eyes still half closed and see 17 missed calls and 12 text messages. My stomach drops before I even start reading. The messages are from cousins and aunts and uncles I barely talk to. I open the first one and my hands start shaking. My mother has told everyone I threatened her during our last phone call. She's saying I told her terrible things I never said. Several relatives are demanding I apologize and others are calling me abusive. I read through all the messages and feel physically sick from the gaslighting. I know exactly what happened during that call, and none of it involved threats. I get out of bed and pace my apartment trying to calm down, but the panic keeps building. I call Alina because she's the only family member who might believe me. She answers on the second ring and asks if I've seen the messages. I tell her yes and ask if she's heard what my mother is saying. She confirms that my mother is telling people I said things I never said. Alina asks if I have any proof of what actually happened, and I realize I should start recording phone calls with my parents for documentation. She warns me that things might get worse before they get better, and suggests I prepare for possible problems. I thank her and hang up feeling like the ground is shifting under my feet. Saturday afternoon, I search online for lawyers who handle family harassment cases. I find one with good reviews and call her office expecting to leave a voicemail. A woman answers and I'm so surprised I almost hang up. I explain my situation and she says she has an opening in an hour if I can come in. I drive to her office building and take the elevator to the 3rd floor. The lawyer is younger than I expected with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She listens while I explain everything about my parents and the escalating demands and the lies they're spreading now. She takes notes and asks specific questions about the harassment pattern. She explains restraining orders and cease and desist letters and the process for documenting everything. She recommends starting with a formal cease and desist letter that clearly states my boundaries and the consequences for breaking them. The letter would demand they stop contacting me directly and stop spreading false information about me to family members and stop appearing at my home or workplace. I agree immediately and she says she'll draft it and send it to me for approval. I leave her office feeling like I've taken real action instead of just reacting to their attacks. Sunday morning, I text Paulina from the support group and ask if she wants to meet for coffee. She responds within minutes saying yes, and we agree on a place near my apartment. I get there first and order a latte and sit at a corner table. She walks in 10 minutes later and hugs me before sitting down. We start talking about our shared experiences growing up, and I'm amazed at how much she remembers. She tells me about times she came to my house and noticed there was no food in the fridge, or my parents were drunk in the middle of the day. Having an outside witness to my childhood helps fight against the gaslighting my mother is attempting now. She validates specific memories I have of wearing the same clothes to the school and eating lunch alone. I tell her about the acne cream incident and she remembers me pulling away from everyone that year. She says she tried to reach out but I wouldn't let anyone in. We talk for 3 hours until the coffee shop starts getting crowded. Before we leave, she tells me she went no contact with her own parents 3 years ago and hasn't regretted it once. She describes the peace she's found in not constantly defending herself or managing their emotions. I realize that's what I want too. She offers to be a support person as I navigate setting firmer boundaries, and I accept without hesitation. Monday morning, I'm at work when my phone buzzes with an email from the lawyer. She sent me the draft cease and desist letter for review. I open it during my lunch break and read through the formal language spelling out my boundaries. The letter demands my parents stop contacting me directly, and stop spreading false information about me to family members, and stop appearing at my home or workplace. It states that breaking these rules will result in pursuit of a restraining order and possible legal action for lies. Seeing everything written out in legal terms feels powerful, like I'm taking control instead of just defending myself. I read through it twice and make one small change to clarify a detail. I email it back to the lawyer with my approval. She responds saying she'll send it via certified mail to my parents' address with copies to Alina as a witness. I feel anxious but also relieved to have taken formal action. That evening, I call Julian and warn him that things might get messy when my parents receive the letter. He tells me he's not going anywhere and he'll support me through whatever happens next. His steady voice calms something inside me that's been panicking all weekend. Tuesday evening, I walk into the community center for support group, and the familiar faces greet me with smiles. I take my usual seat in the circle and wait for everyone to arrive. The facilitator starts the session and asks if anyone has updates to share. I raise my hand and tell them about sending the cease and desist letter to my parents. The room goes quiet as I explain what the letter says, and how my lawyer helped me draft it. When I finish talking, 3 different people nod with understanding looks on their faces. A woman named Sarah shares that she sent a similar letter to her mother 2 years ago, and it was the first step toward real peace. A man across the circle tells us about getting a restraining order against his father, and how the legal boundary gave him permission to stop feeling guilty. Another member describes the relief of having documentation when family members accused her of lying about the abuse. Their stories make me feel less alone and more prepared for whatever happens when my parents get the letter. The facilitator reminds everyone that setting boundaries is self-care and not cruelty, no matter how our parents try to frame it. She says abusive parents will always call boundaries cruel because boundaries threaten their control. I leave the meeting feeling stronger and more certain that I made the right choice. Wednesday morning, I check the tracking information on my phone and see that my parents received the certified letter at 9:30. I put my phone on silent and focus on work, but I can feel it buzzing in my desk drawer every few minutes. By lunchtime, I pull it out and see 47 missed calls and 32 text messages from my parents and various relatives. My hands shake as I forward all of it to my lawyer without reading any of the messages. She texts back within minutes saying this is perfect documentation of their refusal to respect boundaries. The fact that they're contacting me within an hour of receiving a legal letter demanding they stop contact proves they have no intention of following rules. I feel vindicated and terrified at the same time. My phone keeps buzzing throughout the afternoon, and I forward everything to my lawyer as it comes in. By the time I leave work at 5, I have over 100 missed contacts from family members. The volume is overwhelming, but my lawyer says it strengthens our case significantly. Thursday morning, I wake up to a voicemail from my father that makes my blood run cold. His voice is screaming and slurred, and he's threatening to sue me for emotional distress. He says I'm a terrible daughter, and he's going to take me to court and make me pay for what I've done to them. He calls me names I won't repeat and says the lawyer fees will bankrupt me. I save the voicemail and send it to my lawyer before I even get out of bed. She calls me back immediately and says the voicemail is actually helpful for our case because it shows threatening behavior. She asks if I've received anything from my mother, and I check my texts. There's a message from my mom saying I've killed her and she hopes I'm happy now. The dramatic manipulation would be almost funny if it wasn't so disturbing. My lawyer says we need to pursue the restraining order sooner than planned because these messages suggest escalating behavior. I feel scared but also clear that I'm making the right choice. My parents are showing everyone exactly who they are. Thursday evening, Julian picks me up for dinner and I'm grateful for the distraction from the family chaos. We go to a quiet restaurant with dim lighting and soft music. He asks how I'm doing and I tell him about the voicemails and texts. But then I ask if we can talk about something else. He smiles and starts telling me about a book he just finished reading. We talk about our favorite authors and genres, and I realize how much we still have in common. He tells me about places in France he wants to show me someday. He describes walking through lavender fields in Provence and eating fresh bread in Paris cafes. He talks about a small village where his grandmother lived and how peaceful it was. I notice he's talking about future plans with me included, like it's already decided we'll be together. The casual confidence in his voice helps ground me when everything else feels unstable. For 2 hours, I forget about my parents and lawyers and just enjoy being with someone who sees me as worth planning a future with. Friday morning, I'm at my desk reviewing code when the receptionist calls my extension. She sounds nervous as she tells me there are 2 people in the lobby demanding to see me. My stomach drops and I ask who they are. She says they claim to be my parents and they're causing a scene. I tell her to call security immediately, and not to send them up under any circumstances. I walk to my office window that overlooks the parking lot, and watch as 2 security guards escort my parents off the property. My mother is crying and gesturing wildly. My father is red-faced and yelling. They came to my workplace despite the cease and desist letter explicitly forbidding this exact thing. My hands shake as I pull out my phone and call my lawyer. She answers on the second ring and I explain what just happened. She asks if security has documentation, and I say I'll get it. She tells me this workplace violation is grounds for an emergency restraining order. I hang up and go down to talk to the security supervisor. He already has incident reports written up and offers to provide copies for my lawyer. I thank him and return to my office feeling like I might throw up. Friday afternoon, my lawyer files for the emergency restraining order, and I have to leave work early to go to her office. She has me sit down and walks me through what I need to provide. I spend 2 hours writing out a detailed statement about the harassment pattern starting from my mother's initial surgery request. I describe every demand for money and every guilt trip and every lie they told family members. I write about the Facebook post and the email itemizing the cost of raising me. I detail the apartment building incident and the voicemails and texts that came after the cease and desist letter. Writing it all out in chronological order makes me see clearly how much I've tolerated over the years. I've been managing their behavior and emotions since childhood, and the pattern has only gotten worse as I've tried to set boundaries. My lawyer reviews my statement and adds her own documentation of the contacts we've received. She files everything electronically with the court, and we wait. 3 hours later, she gets an email saying a judge has reviewed the petition and granted a temporary restraining order. The order forbids my parents from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. There's a hearing scheduled for Monday to determine if the order should be extended. I leave her office feeling exhausted, but also relieved that there's finally a legal barrier between us. Saturday morning, I pack a bag and drive to Julian's apartment. He opens the door and pulls me into a hug before I even say hello. I told him last night about the workplace incident and the restraining order. He takes my bag and leads me inside. His apartment is smaller than mine, but cozy with books on every surface and plants in the windows. He's made coffee and bought pastries from a bakery near his building. We sit on his couch and I finally let myself relax. He asks what I need and I tell him I just need to not think about my parents for a while. He nods and suggests we watch movies all day. We spend Saturday on his couch working through his collection of French films with English subtitles. He makes lunch and dinner and checks on me without being overbearing. He gives me space when I need it and holds me when I start crying. By Saturday night, I feel safe enough to actually sleep. Sunday morning, I wake up in Julian's bed and he's already awake reading. He smiles when he sees me open my eyes and asks if I want breakfast. We make scrambled eggs together in his tiny kitchen and eat on the couch. The normalcy of it feels healing after the chaos of the past week. We spend Sunday talking about everything and nothing. He tells me stories about his childhood in France, and I share memories from before my parents' neglect got really bad. We exist together in comfortable silence when we run out of words. In the afternoon, we go for a walk around his neighborhood and hold hands like we're the only two people in the world. When we get back to his apartment, he makes tea and we sit on his balcony watching the sunset. During a quiet moment, he turns to me and his expression is serious. He tells me he's falling in love with me again, or maybe he never stopped. He says he wants me to know where he stands because he doesn't want there to be any confusion this time. My throat gets tight and tears start falling before I can stop them. I tell him I love him too, and I probably never stopped either. He pulls me close and I cry against his chest with relief and fear and hope all mixed together. He promises we'll get through this together, and for the first time in my life, I believe someone when they say that. Monday morning, we drive to the courthouse together for the restraining order hearing. Julian waits in the hallway while I meet with my lawyer. She reviews what will happen and reminds me to stay calm no matter what my parents say. We walk into the courtroom and I see my parents sitting on the other side with their own lawyer. My mother looks frail and sad like she's been crying for days. My father looks angry and keeps glaring at me. The judge calls the case and both lawyers approach the bench. My parents' lawyer starts talking about how I'm a vindictive daughter who abandoned my elderly parents in their time of need. He paints me as cruel and heartless and says the restraining order is retaliation for them asking for help. My lawyer stands up and presents the documentation. She shows the judge the cease and desist letter and the timeline of contacts that came after. She plays the voicemail of my father screaming threats. She shows the text from my mother saying I killed her. She presents the security reports from my apartment building and my workplace. She shows the Facebook post and the email itemizing my childhood costs. The judge listens without expression, and then asks my parents if they have anything to say. My father starts to speak, but the judge cuts him off and tells him to let his lawyer talk. Their lawyer tries to explain that my parents were just concerned and didn't understand the legal letter. The judge looks at them and says that showing up at someone's workplace after being told in writing not to contact them shows a clear disregard for boundaries. He grants a 1-year restraining order and warns my parents that any violations will result in criminal charges. My mother starts crying loudly, and my father stands up looking like he wants to argue. The bailiff steps forward and my father sits back down. The judge dismisses us, and I walk out of the courtroom with my lawyer. Julian is waiting in the hallway and his face lights up when he sees me. My lawyer shakes my hand and reminds me to call if my parents violate the order. Julian takes my hand, and we walk out of the courthouse into bright sunlight. The relief I feel is overwhelming and physical, like I've been holding my breath for years and can finally exhale. We get in his car, and he asks where I want to go. I realize I'm hungry for the first time in days and suggest lunch. We stop at a small cafe and order sandwiches and sit outside in the sunshine. The world feels lighter without the constant weight of managing my parents' emotions and defending my choices. My phone buzzes and I tense up, but it's just a text from Alina. She says she heard about the restraining order and she's proud of me. She says she'll support whatever relationship I choose to have or not have with my parents going forward. I text back thanking her and put my phone away. Julian reaches across the table and takes my hand. We sit there in the sun eating lunch, and I let myself imagine a future where I'm not constantly fighting battles I never asked for. The next morning, I wake up with a strange lightness in my chest, like someone removed a weight I didn't realize I was carrying. I check my phone expecting the usual flood of missed calls and angry messages, but there's nothing from my parents. The restraining order is working. I get ready for work and actually feel excited about the day ahead, instead of dreading what fresh drama might arrive. At the office, I throw myself into a new project and my productivity surprises even me. Melody stops by my desk around lunch and comments that I seem different, more relaxed. I tell her the legal situation is handled and she gives me a knowing smile. We grab sandwiches from the cafe downstairs and eat in the break room, talking about normal things like weekend plans and a new show everyone is watching. The ordinariness of it feels like a luxury. That evening, Julian comes over after work, and we cook dinner together in my kitchen. He chops vegetables while I handle the pasta, and we move around each other easily, like we've been doing this for years instead of weeks. We eat on my couch with plates balanced on our laps, and he tells me about a difficult translation project at work. I actually have the mental space to listen and engage instead of being consumed by family crisis. After dinner, we watch a movie, but I fall asleep halfway through with my head on his shoulder. He wakes me gently when it ends and kisses me goodnight before heading home. The routine feels healing. My therapy session with Laura on Wednesday focuses on processing the restraining order hearing and what comes next. She asks how I'm feeling now that the immediate crisis has passed, and I realize I feel guilty for feeling good. She helps me understand that relief is a normal response to escaping an abusive situation, not something I should feel bad about. We talk about the support group and how hearing other people's stories has helped me recognize patterns I couldn't see in my own life. Lara gives me homework to journal about moments when I feel happy without immediately waiting for something bad to happen. Tuesday evening, I attend the support group and share about the restraining order being granted. Several people congratulate me, and one woman who went through something similar offers practical advice about what to do if my parents try to contact me through other people. Paulina sits next to me and squeezes my hand when I get emotional, talking about how strange it feels to not be constantly managing my parents' feelings. After the meeting ends, we grab coffee at a nearby shop and talk for over an hour. She tells me she's proud of how far I've come in just a few months, and I realize she's right. I am different now. The weeks pass in a blur of work projects, therapy sessions, support group meetings, and time with Julian. I start sleeping better and my appetite returns. My apartment feels like a home instead of just a place to hide. Julian and I fall into a comfortable rhythm of seeing each other several times a week, and I find myself trusting him more with each conversation. He's patient when I have moments of anxiety about the relationship, never pushing but always reassuring. One night he tells me he's falling for me all over again, and I believe him because his actions match his words. 2 months after the restraining order hearing, I receive a call from my lawyer. She tells me a letter arrived from my mother that was forwarded through her office per the court order. My stomach drops and I ask if I have to read it. She says I don't, but she's reviewed it and thinks I might want to, that it's different from previous communications. I tell her to scan and email it to me, and I'll decide after talking to Lara. That evening, I sit in Lara's office with my laptop open to the email containing the scanned letter. My hands shake as I click to open the attachment. The letter is handwritten on plain notebook paper, my mother's messy cursive filling 2 full pages. I read it out loud to Lara, my voice breaking several times. My mother writes that she started seeing a therapist after the restraining order was granted. She says the therapist is helping her understand how her actions affected me throughout my childhood and into adulthood. She acknowledges specific incidents, including the acne cream, the birthday meals, leaving me leftovers while they ate real food. She writes that she's starting to see how she prioritized her and my father's wants over my basic needs. She says she wants to apologize without expecting anything from me in return, that she understands if I never want to speak to her again. The letter ends with her saying she hopes someday I can be happy, and that she's sorry for making that harder than it should have been. I finish reading and look at Lara with tears streaming down my face. Part of me wants to believe my mother is really changing, that therapy is helping her see what she did wrong. But a bigger part of me is scared this is just another manipulation, a new tactic to get around the restraining order. Lara lets me sit with my feelings for a few minutes before speaking. She reminds me that real change takes years, not months, and that one letter doesn't undo decades of harmful behavior. She says it's okay to feel both hopeful and skeptical, that those feelings can exist together. We talk about what responding might look like and what not responding might look like, and she emphasizes that both choices are valid. Over the next few days, I think constantly about the letter. I read it multiple times, analyzing every word for hidden meanings or guilt trips. Julian asks if I want to talk about it, and I show him the letter. He reads it carefully, and then tells me he thinks my mother might be sincere, but that doesn't mean I owe her anything. His perspective helps me see that my mother taking steps to change is good for her regardless of whether it changes our relationship. I decide to write a response through my lawyer. I keep it brief and clear. I write that I received her letter and I appreciate her going to therapy. I tell her I'm glad she's working on understanding how her actions affected me. But I also write that I'm not ready for contact yet, that I need more time to heal and work on myself. I say I'll reach out if and when that changes, but she shouldn't expect it to be soon. I end by saying I hope therapy continues to help her. I send the draft to my lawyer and she files it with the court and forwards it to my mother's attorney. Setting that boundary without feeling crushing guilt feels like a major milestone. I tell Lara about it in our next session, and she celebrates the progress with me. That evening, Julian comes over and cooks my favorite meal to celebrate. We eat at my small dining table and he asks me questions about what I'm learning in therapy. I tell him about recognizing healthy relationship patterns and learning to trust consistency. He reaches across the table and takes my hand, telling me he's committed to being consistent and trustworthy. I believe him. Paulina texts me after I tell her about the letter and my response. She writes that she's proud of how far I've come in just a few months, that the person who gave her parents everything hoping to earn love wouldn't have been able to set that boundary. I read her message several times and realized she's right. I am different now. I'm learning that love isn't something you earn through perfect behavior or financial support. Real love is given freely by people who see your worth. 3 months into our renewed relationship, Julian suggests we take a weekend trip to the coast. I agree immediately, and we spend the next week planning where to stay and what to do. Friday afternoon, we leave work early and drive 3 hours to a small beach town. We check into a modest hotel with an ocean view and spend the evening walking on the beach. The sound of waves and the smell of salt air clear my head in a way nothing else has. We have dinner at a seafood restaurant and talk about everything and nothing. That night, I sleep better than I have in months. Saturday morning, we wake up early and walk on the beach before it gets crowded. The sand is cool under my feet and the sun is just starting to warm the air. Julian takes my hand as we walk and I feel completely present in the moment, not worried about what might go wrong or waiting for happiness to be taken away. We find a quiet spot and sit on the sand watching the waves. Julian turns to me with a serious expression and tells me he wants to build a real future with me. He says he's not talking about getting engaged tomorrow, but he wants me to know his intentions are serious. He wants us to move in together next year and see where life takes us. I feel tears start, but they're happy tears for once. I tell him I want that too, that I'm ready to build something real with someone who actually loves me. We talk about what our life could look like, where we might live, how we'd combine our routines and spaces. The conversation feels natural and exciting instead of scary. For the first time, I let myself dream about a future without constantly bracing for it to fall apart. We spend the rest of the weekend exploring the town, eating good food and talking about our plans. Sunday afternoon, we drive back to the city, and I feel different from I did on Friday. My parents may never change, and some family relationships may be permanently damaged. But I'm building something better with people who actually love me. Julian, Lara, Paulina, Melody, even Alina in her own way. These are people who show up consistently, who respect my boundaries, who celebrate my growth instead of punishing it. That's enough. That's more than enough. It's everything I needed and never had, and I'm finally letting myself